So we're doing this, I guess. Hi, I'm Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. And you are here for day 112 of 365 days of soap. And we are doing a revisit for soap labeling. Someone tagged me in something a couple weeks ago on one of the Facebook soap forums about labeling. And so I did some digging because I haven't been on those things in a while. And wow, there's so much weird information out there, misinformation out there that I didn't even cover in the last soap labeling video. And I wanted to move on to cosmetic labeling. And I can't do so. We have to debunk these soap myths first before we can move on. So first up, couple things right off the top. First and foremost, this discussion is for soap labeling only. We are not touching cosmetics. We are doing soap labeling. That's it. Second, no matter what you decide to do with your soap labels, sell your soap naked, put labels on, include the ingredients, don't include the ingredients. The first and foremost rule that you have to follow is you cannot mislead your customers. You cannot intentionally be deceptive. That is a law, regardless of who controls what throughout the whole soap labeling thing. Third, I think you should put your ingredients on your labels, and I think you should put them all. That is my thought process. That's what I think you should do as a responsible soap maker. Should does not mean must, however, and that's where I have a problem. All of these soap forums with people just popping off with these declarative statements of you have to do it this way, you must do it this way, it's the law. I just can't abide because that's not accurate. And if it's not accurate, I'm going to correct some inaccuracies. So that's what we're doing today. And I will be getting you a cosmetics labeling video very, very soon. I promise. That's what I was working on when I went down the rabbit hole of Facebook. So, let's start this and hope I don't die throughout the process. Okay, first and foremost, let's pick off the low-hanging fruit. The claim that you have to put your ingredients on your soaps. Okay, so let's remember a couple things. As we discussed in the previous 3 videos, how many have we done? I think 3, right? My God. The FDA requires ingredient labeling on all products that they regulate. Soap is specifically exempt from the FDA's regulations. The FTC, which regulates other consumer commodities, does not require ingredient specifications. The CPSC, which regulates soap, has no guidelines for labeling. So right off the bat, first and foremost, ingredients are not required on your soap labels. You can put them on, you cannot put them on. I've already given you my disclaimers and my opinion on the matter in the beginning of all of this. I'm just saying legally, you can do, or you cannot do. And anyone who tells you otherwise does not know what they're talking about. Next. Okay, claim number 2. You cannot label out of the pot. If you were going to put an ingredients declaration on your soap, which you don't have to do, you cannot label out of the pot. It has to be everything that goes into the pot. Back to the aforementioned, FDA does not regulate. FTC, which does other consumer commodities, has no requirements. CPSC also has no requirements. You can go in the pot, you can go out of the pot. Interestingly, the FDA has weighed in on this when it comes to cosmetics and has stated that a product that is made with a chemical reaction can be labeled either what goes into it or what goes out. So, the FDA has ruled in on cosmetics. Doesn't control soaps, but even going to the cosmetic form, you can name what comes out of the pot. And labeling what comes out of the pot is neither untruthful or misleading, because what comes out of the pot is literally soap. It's the chemical term name for what happens when your alkali solution hits your fatty acids. Sodium cocoate, sodium stearate, sodium palm. You get it. So yes, you can label what comes out of the pot if you want to, be more chemically accurate with sodium stearate, palmate, all that jazz, and or omit your lye from your ingredients list. And honestly, you can go either way with that. I've done either way. I don't think either one of them is inaccurate. Definitely. So when someone tells you you can't label out of the pot, again, nothing to back that up. Next. Now, claim sub 2 would be you can't label what comes out of the pot because you don't know how to calculate the glycerin. You have no way of determining how to calculate the glycerin, and all of the ingredients have to be in descending order because reasons, and so therefore you can't do it. Ingredients don't technically have to be in descending order for a soap because there are no requirements and regulations for a soap ingredient declaration, or that you even need one at all. 2, you can reasonably estimate how much glycerin comes out of whatever batch, whatever recipe, using kind of a basic chemical formulation. So there are actually a couple formulations that you can use for this. And if you're interested in the more complicated one, I'm happy to discuss it in the comments. Let me know, and we can, break it down more. But that is, again, getting very much into the chemistry of soap, and you might not be into that. So look at soap basically like this. Everything has a molecular weight, right? And everything is structured, therefore, within chemistry. Soap is basically, when it's done its saponification thing, 3 moles of soap and 1 mole of glycerin. That does not necessarily mean that there's 25% glycerin in the soap, however, because of the way that the fatty acid chains react to the lye itself. Again, that's getting into the chemistry. But a really easy way to determine roughly how much glycerin is in your soap is to take the amount of lye that you used for your recipe, so let's say 5 ounces, and multiply that by 0.77. And that's going to give you the number of ounces of glycerin-ish that exist. Now, you could then take that number and divide it among all of the oils that you have in the recipe, and therefore then change those percentages. I mean, maybe we need an example here. Hi, editing me here, actually, and I am not really willing to speed past this one. So I am going to explain what it is I just said, but not with this, not with this. Don't skip through, I promise. This is an equation that's, it's the chemical equation to determine how much glycerin, exists at the end of saponification. And this is important. It is in Kevin Dunn's book, and it's in, as you can see, chapter 12, called Saponification. I've told you guys a whole bunch of times to get this book. But looking at, this equation can be a little scary. So I'm going to break it down to an easier version so you understand where that 0.77 is coming from, okay? We're going to do this together. It's all going to be great. You're going to understand this. I promise. I promise. It's going to be way easier than this one. Okay, so first up, some definitions. I mean, I am always calling, soap and fatty acids and an alkali solution or whatever. It's not technically true, but, without trying to overcomplicate things, I just say fatty acids. What we are really working with in soap are the triglycerides that exist within an oil. And triglycerides are composed of 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerin. Now, think of that in terms of like the 3 chains, they kind of form like a knuckle, right? And during saponification, those knuckles get broken off, and those 3 fatty acid chains effectively become soap. So in soap, after saponification is complete, that means there are 3 moles of soap and 1 mole of glycerin. Now, in chemistry, we are always dealing with molecular weights. And so the 2 useful molecular weights that you actually need for these purposes right now are the molecular weights of glycerin as well as the molecular weights of sodium hydroxide. Now, you can do this equation exactly with the same way with potassium hydroxide and also convert and figure out how much glycerin too exists after saponification, but we are dealing with sodium hydroxide right now. So glycerin is 92 grams per mole. That's the molecular weight. Sodium hydroxide, 40 grams per mole. That's the molecular weight. And that basically means that it takes, yeah, how am I going to word this? I'm sorry. Look at this. I'm typing it out, guys. I'm not even writing it down. I'm typing it out for you in big font. This is the best way to word it. For every 3 moles of sodium hydroxide consumed, 1 mole of glycerin is created. Okay? So there are a couple ways to do this formulation and make it a little bit easier. One way would be to take, your sodium hydroxide, your amount of sodium hydroxide, divided by 40 grams, because that's the molecular weight first, and then take that and divide it by 3, and then multiply it by 92. So if in any given recipe, let's say again 5 ounces, you would take 5 divided by 40 divided by 3 times 92, and that would get you some kind of thing, right? But that's still kind of hard to remember that equation, every time that you make soap, right? Every time, so that where the NaOH is there, you're going to plug in the amount of sodium hydroxide that you're using in any given recipe, which changes depending on how you actually formulate your recipe, right? It changes because saponification is what? The amount of lye needed to convert your fatty acids, your triglycerides, into soap, right? So there's an easier way, the 0.77 rule. This is what I think you should just take away from this and remember. So instead of doing all of that and trying to remember what that is, multiply everything by 0.77. But I'm going to show you how 0.77 became a thing in the first place. So you're going to take the molecular weight of glycerin, and that's going to be divided by 3, because 3 moles of sodium hydroxide times 40, right? So 3 times 40, do that first. We're gonna fix the maths there. There you go. So it's the molecular weight of glycerin, so 92 divided by 3 times 40, which gets you 0.77. So that's how I get the 0.77. And now you can take that 0.77 and multiply it by whatever amount of sodium hydroxide exists in any recipe from here on out. And it's going to give you the amount in ounces or grams. It literally doesn't matter, however you formulate your soap recipes, of glycerin that exists after saponification. And then you can take that in comparison to the total batch weight and get the percentage of glycerin that exists in the batch. So you know where to put it on your recipes, or on your ingredient list, rather, your ingredient declaration, if you choose to do so. Again, this whole last video is about you don't have to do so, but if you want to, this is how you can do. I'm going to give you some examples here, which will also, kind of further a couple things that I'm about to say later when I go back to the face thing. So we're going to play some examples because it's going to be fun. But again, the maths have already been worked out. So 0.77 times however much lye exists in your recipe, however much sodium hydroxide exists in your recipe, and that's going to give you the amount of glycerin that exists after saponification. So I'm going to give you an example so this sort of makes sense, right? But this is also interesting, diving into the deeper parts of chemistry of soap. This is how you formulate recipes to get more glycerin or less glycerin. It's all a thing. And again, I talk about it later, whatever. And so just refer back to this for this. So I'm killing two birds, one stone, all the things. So in the first example, 16 ounces of oils. All of these examples will be 16 ounces of oils, a 5% superfat, and the water is 38% of the total oil weight. Okay. So we have 33% coconut oil in this with a saponification value of 0.184, which gets us 5.28 ounces of coconut oil, 33% palm, saponification of 0.141 gets us 5.28 ounces of palm oil, and 34% olive, saponification value is 0.135, and that 34% yields 5.44 ounces to get a total oil weight of 16 ounces. You plug that into soap calc with, again, 5% superfat, water is 38% of the oils, and that gives us 2.33 ounces of lye. And for the water, it is like 6.08 ounces, I think. And so then you have to look at your total batch weight. Now, looking at your total batch weight is actually important when you are calculating your percentages of glycerin, instead of you having to calculate it out yourself or just kind of do guesswork, because you can take the total amount of glycerin that exists in the batch, whatever that ounce is, divide it by the total batch weight, and then take that number and multiply it by 100, and you have your percentage. So that's great. And I'm going to play around with this and figure out how I'm going to fix all this. Hold on. I don't really know how to fix this. I'm already on a roll, so maybe you'll just scroll. So I'm going to go ahead and put up here that, just so you guys know, if you're screenshotting and whatever for future reference, all at 5% superfat. That says superheat. I'm not going to change it. Awesome. I love that for me. With water at 38% of oils. Cool. Superheat means super fat. Super fat. Okay, fat. All right. So we're going to take the 2.33 ounces and we're going to multiply that by 0.77. And that is going to give us, tell me what it's going to give me. 1.79 ounces of glycerin that exists in the batch. So then you take that and you divide that by the total batch weight of the 24.91 ounces. And that will yield a 7.2% glycerin. So 7.2% of the batch is glycerin, of the soap is glycerin. So now you know where to put it in your labeling. And let's just delete this, make it, just all of it, just all the way up, because we're going to do a couple more examples. This is where the fun with the chemistry and the saponification values and medium fatty acid chains versus, this is where it all comes in. So the next example we're going to give, again, still 16 ounces, but this time we're going to go 100% coconut oil. Now, coconut oil has a lot of medium fatty acid chains. And this, again, the saponification value, still the same, all the thing, whatever, but we're doing 16 full ounces. Now, because it's 16 full ounces of, it's a 100% coconut oil soap, the lye changes, okay? So the lye is going to change in this case to 2.79 ounces. The water does not change. This is a lye discount to get that super fat, right? And so we are looking at 6.08 ounces of water as well, which, because of the extra inclusion of the lye, there's more lye in there that is required to fully saponify the coconut oil, excluding the 5% super fat. There's more lye. So therefore the batch weight also changes. And so the new batch weight is going to be 25.37 ounces. Okay. Now again, that's important. That's important. If you want to easily convert your percentages, you can convert your percentages, a number of different ways, but this is the easiest way to do it. So we're going to take, again, that lye changed. So 2.79 ounces times 0.77 equals, what does it equal? 2.15 ounces of glycerin that exists in the batch. Okay. And that's a yield of 8.46% glycerin. So see how it changed. A 100% coconut oil soap has more glycerin in it than this well-balanced coconut oil, palm oil, olive oil, basically in equal parts. And also to that, throughout cure, as the bar continues to lose weight, to lose water weight, it will, the potency, the amount of glycerin that exists in the soap will increase slightly. So from 1 to 3%. So just keep that in mind. Again, this is all about where to put the glycerin in the batch, and somebody's saying you can never know that. Yes, you can. So here's another example of 16 ounces of oil, 100% olive oil soap. Now that saponification value is pretty low, right? It takes less lye, sodium hydroxide, to convert the olive than it does the coconut and the palm to that. So also the lye changes, see? Less lye. And therefore the total batch weight is also going to change. And so the total batch weight on this guy is going to be 24.64 ounces. And you're going to take that 2.06 ounces of lye, sodium hydroxide. I'm sorry that I put it lye the whole time, guys. I'm sorry. It's sodium hydroxide. We are dealing with solid soap for this. Anyway, 2.06 ounces times 0.77 equals 1.59 ounces of glycerin in the finished product. Now take that, divide by the total batch weight, and then multiply that number by 100, and you have 6.44% glycerin in the batch. Wildly different, right? Less glycerin in that one than the other. Really than both the other two. And so this is where like the fun and the chemistry of, formulating soap recipes really come in with the glycerin concentrations and everything, because it's fascinating. But not getting too deep into that, this is how you determine how much glycerin exists in your finished product. It's not a complicated formula. It can be, or you can just take the amount of lye and multiply it by 0.77, and that's going to give you the amount of glycerin in a soap. But I think the easiest way for you to determine where glycerin gets placed, if you want to go in descending order with your ingredients list, is to, again, just take the amount of lye that you've put in your soap, multiply that by 0.77, and that's going to give you the amount of glycerin. And then therefore, based on the rest of your recipe, you can reasonably and rationally put that in where it belongs in your list. Make sense? As a side note, because I'm talking about getting too far into the chemistry and wanting to do another equation with you, getting into the chemistry when it comes to the amount of glycerin that is produced in a soap also helps you troubleshoot problems like, why does my cold process soap sweat? And that has a lot to do with the oils that you're using, the fatty acids that you're using to make your cold process, and therefore the amount of glycerin that's being produced in the bar. It's really cool stuff. But you can't label what comes out of the pot because you don't know how much glycerin. That is a very easy peasy rough guideline on how to do it ish. Now also keep in mind that you can still send these things off, right? You can send your soaps off to get tested, and then you know exactly where the glycerin goes and exactly how much of all of them. I think there are countries that literally have to do that in order to market and sell their soaps. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I was talking to somebody in the comments about that. And if that's true, let me know. So it can be done. So this idea of you can't do it because thus, again, is just these declarative statements that are just, no. Next. Another claim that I saw a whole lot of was if you list one ingredient, you have to list them all. False. No requirements means no requirements. It's weird. I grant you that. It is weird. living in this very strange gray area where soap is just soap. But it is what it is. And again, I think you should put your ingredients on your labels. But when someone tells you you have to, and if you list one, you have to list them all, that is not true. Now, keeping in mind that one of the first things I said in today's episode of misleading your customers, if you do your ingredient listing in such a way that it makes it look like it is a proper ingredient listing, a proper ingredient declaration, the consumer may very well assume that whatever you put in is the whole ass list. So you need to be more conversational in your wording. Saying things like, made with shea butter, olive oil, and blah, 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 and other oils and ingredients. To make it clear to them that that's not the whole ingredient listing. Now, why you would not want to put all of your ingredients on a bar of soap, be either saponified oils of ... or sodium stearate, sodium cocoate, leave out the lye, or coconut oil, olive oil, distilled water, sodium hydroxide. Why you would not want to put all of your ingredients on your label, be it in the pot or out of the pot, I don't know. And I have to question your motivations at that point, but that's as far as I can go with that. You're technically within bounds and within your rights to omit ingredients on your labels. I think you should not do that. But that doesn't mean you can't do that. And ultimately, bottom line, if you feel like you need to hide an ingredient in your recipes, I think you should be asking yourself why and maybe be reformulating your recipes so they better fit what it is that you want to give people. Because if you're afraid to give them something that has like red dye number 974 or whatever in it, well, take that red dye out. You don't find another thing. Just a thought. But, again, not a legal requirement. Next. Another claim that I saw that's like making big traction right now, which is wild, is that you can't just put mica on your soaps. You have to list out all of the things that go into the mica, that make the mica the color that it is. And again, no requirements means no requirements. And since soap is soap and not regulated by the FDA as a cosmetic, it does not follow cosmetic colorant guidelines any more than it follows cosmetic product information and ingredient declaration guidelines for all the rest of it. It just doesn't. You can, in fact, put micas. You can put color. You can do all of those things. Now, as for soap, and we have like a lot of things that go on the back of our labels or whatever, should you put mica? Yeah, you can totally just put micas. Fine. As long as you have a website somewhere that actually blows out all of it, that would be, my druthers. So if you put it on your label, just mica, fine. But, on your website, make sure that it's blown out, or you keep very good records, because there will come a time when someone is going to ask you, what is in this? I just got a reaction for ... And you need to be able to give them that information right off the bat. So to that, might be easier to go ahead and put, micas and oxide and you blow out what the micas are. And if you're ordering from places like Mad Micas, they just put it right there on the label for you to make it real easy for your labeling. But being told that you can't just put mica when you don't even have to list mica just is wrong. That's wrong. That is an inaccurate statement. You don't have to blow out the ingredients. Now, for cosmetics, you super do. And there are requirements for that. But again, we are not talking about cosmetics. We are talking about specifically soap. So if you are marketing your soap as specifically soap and making no cosmetic claims, you don't have to do that. An argument that I saw in response to the last one, wherein you have to list the mica, was you don't need to list mica at all because it's always going to exist at less than 1% of your formulation. And anything less than 1% does not have to be included on your label. No. I actually had to reach out to Marie Gale for this one because I was big shooketh when I saw this in a thread, that people actually believe that anything less than 1% in your recipe does not have to be on your label. Now, for soap, that is technically true because technically speaking, nothing needs to be on your label. But I really need to drive this point home, okay? When you are formulating your lotions, your bath bombs, your scrubs, your face masks, your all of the things that are not soap and are therefore cosmetics, things that are less than 1% of your formulation still have to go on the label. They still have to. There is nothing that says they don't. The only thing that the FDA does say on that is that you can list it in whatever order that you want if it's less than 1%. So you can go alphabetically, you can, whatever. And I did reach out to Marie Gale for this one because I was really confused as to how people got to this conclusion that anything under 1% doesn't have to be listed on your labels for a cosmetic. And so it's kind of an aside with all of this, but she suggested that maybe this has something to do with incidental ingredients, right? Because the FDA does have some regulations involving incidental ingredients and, essentially that they don't have to be, listed. And she believes that maybe somehow along the way that got misconstrued from incidental ingredients to anything less than 1% is considered incidental. But that's not what the FDA says on the matter. The FDA says this, quote, any processing aid added or removed or converted to a declared ingredient or any ingredient of another ingredient or processing aid present at an insignificant level and having no technical or functional effect need not be declared. Says incidental ingredients need not be declared on a label. So a processing aid, something that's added or removed or, is consumed essentially during the making of a product. Interestingly, here in number 2, they actually give an example and they use sodium hydroxide as the example. So to that, this is a different can of worms, but it only furthers the case about not having to include lye in your label. Instead, you can put in the finished product, the sodium stearate, cocoa, you get it. Because lye is added and consumed, removed, during the process of saponification. So it doesn't exist in the bar anymore, if you know what you're doing. And we all know what we're doing. We are not making bad soaps. So, technically speaking, lye could be considered an incidental. That might be a case that is winnable, for sure. It's a little bit of a gray area, but I think it could be, especially considering the FDA used sodium hydroxide, lye, as an example in their listing regarding incidental ingredients, which I find fascinating. And again, that particular conversation with Mica's incidental ingredients, that is still going into cosmetics because, technically speaking, soap doesn't need ingredient declarations at all. At all. But I do find that interesting because that's something to definitely keep in mind when you start reading these things on the interwebs, start piecing together where maybe this information was coming from. And again, as I said, reaching out to Marie, I think her theory makes the most sense. I think that's where it all came from. But incidental ingredients, yeah, sure, you don't have to put them on your cosmetic labels, but for your cosmetic labels, you sure do have to put everything that's in the product, including the things that are present at less than 1%. Now back to the thing that I was just talking about, like not including the lye because, it can be considered an incidental ingredient in your soap. I'm not saying that you put in there like olive oil, shea butter, palm oil, kaolin clay, fragrance, micas, and just leave the lye out. Because that actually is deceptive. That does suggest that the soap is made out of just those things. It's just made out of oils. And that actually is kind of misleading. So, if you're going to do it that way, definitely include the lye. Or conversationally, made with blah, 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 oils of blah, 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 and other ingredients. Or again, sodium cocoate, sodium stearate, the stuff that comes out of the pot. Excluding lye for the sake of excluding lye, but still wanting everything to look very beautifully whatever. I mean, just saying something like coconut, palm, olive, argan, kaolin clay, fragrance, micas, ground pumpkin seed. Oh, that smells good. That's not, I would find that deceiving. So I don't think you should do it that way. I really don't think you should do that just for the sake of omitting lye. Technically speaking, you can do, but I think you're actually treading on very thin ice by doing it that way because, again, number one rule, number one law, you can't intentionally deceive or mislead your customers. So there's that. So wrapping this all up, what does this all mean? Well, it means that there are more myths out there, just misinformation out there about soap than I realized. Again, this was stuff that I did not even touch on in the first soap labeling video. I didn't hear of half of these things. But second, don't believe everything that you see on the internet. Not in blogs, not in forums, not in videos, including me, including from me. Do your own research. And I know something sounds completely logical when someone tells you you have to put an ingredient list. Oh, well, I guess that makes sense. That's logical. Yeah, sure. That is actually logical. But where we live in the gray area of soap making, it's not actually required. And so that's the problem that I actually have with all of these very, very in your face, you are doing this wrong, and they're just dogpiling on people for no good reason whatsoever and spreading bad information in the process. So do your own research. And, for those of you who make comments on the interwebs and whatever, before you make said comment, especially if you're going to do it with such conviction that you know you're right, make sure that you've done your homework. Make sure that you come equipped with receipts and, proper receipts. Ideally from, .gov pages, because you can go directly to the FDA, the FTC, the CPSC, as I've been doing, and get your information. And if you're still confused about things, reach out to your people, reach out to your governmental offices. That's what they're there for. They really will help. You can talk to an ombudsman and a representative of every single one of these departments. Send them an email. They've always responded to me. And I actually reached out to all of these departments before I made any of these videos just to double check that the information that I believe I know was honest and accurate, because I don't want to give you bad information. But that said, still don't trust me. Do your own research. I guess the overarching thing with all of this also is that I really wish soap makers just in general would stop actively trying to pick fights with each other for the sake of picking fights. I don't understand it. I've never got that at all. And it seems like the way that people structure their comments just start out inflammatory. And it's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help anyone learn, especially when you're giving them bad information. And so, ultimately, I would like everybody to just have more chill and more grace and just not be this. But, at the end of the day, if you're going to continue to do that, if you want to put information out on the interwebs and make very, very strong claims about what you can and can't do when it comes to soap, you need to be like the state of Missouri and show me. That does it for me today, guys. It's time to go and do something else with my night, really. And yeah, I will be back tomorrow actually with a longer deep dive than this one because, this one was just had to get some stuff out, but tomorrow's going to be kind of a long deep dive and something that I'm really looking forward to. So definitely tune back in for that one. And, maybe I'll explain what I'm doing here. Just trying something out. Oh, I just explained it. Just trying out a new space. Yes. So, yeah, no, I do appreciate you guys for being here today. And if you have any questions about any of this, obviously, reach out to me for sure. I can help you as best I can. But again, if you still have questions, go to the source. That's the best way to really do any of this, for sure. Don't necessarily trust anything that I have to say either. I try to give you good information, but, I'll mess up things from time to time too. So, yeah, always trust your gut and make sure that you have your information really well in hand. If you're interested in the new, thing and the deep dive that's tomorrow or whatever, click the subscribe button and the bell, and then you'll know when it comes up. For those of you who have done both of those things, hey, Sudsers, what kind of weird things have you seen on the soap forums these days? I'd love to talk about them. I'm out of here for today, but I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another round of soapy fun. Bye. Seriously, I'm all out.